The summer I first lived alone was the kind of summer that makes you believe life will always taste like sunshine. I had just started working at a small retail shop downtown. The days were long but light-hearted, the breeze wandered lazily through the streets, children squealed as they chased one another past the benches where aunties sat gossiping, and buskers played songs no one really knew but everyone pretended to hum along to. One particular afternoon, leaning at the doorway of my shop, I noticed something unusual. Across the way, a small commotion had gathered. At the center of it all stood several policemen, circling as though they were about to handcuff a criminal. But the criminal had 4 legs, floppy ears, and a tail wagging in frantic confusion. A dog. I whispered. At that moment, one of my regular customers, a woman with her child, often in for ice cream cones or just a chat, came by, laughing so hard she could barely get the words out. Between giggles, she explained the scene to me. Apparently, the dog had wandered into the city zoo. Not through the main entrance, either, he had slipped past the gates like a seasoned escape artist. After sniffing around, he made his way directly into the penguin enclosure. The penguins didn't seem to mind. In fact, by the woman's description, it sounded as though they had welcomed him as one of their own. He splashed in the fountain, tail wagging, while the penguins waddled beside him, tilting their heads curiously. Together they looked like the strangest little parade the zoo had ever seen. But when it came time to leave, the dog realized the wall was too high to jump back over. Wet, trembling, and barking for help, he found himself stuck. The penguins looked on, sympathetic but helpless. That's when the zookeepers called the police. By now, a squad of officers had arrived, and the story spread quickly down the street. The boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, wide-eyed. "They're taking him to jail," he whispered. I laughed, until the truth dawned on me like a bucket of ice water. That dog. That dripping, guilty-looking escapee. It was my dog, Bonzo. I must have gone pale, because the woman immediately said, "Go. I'll mind the shop for you." She smiled, and her child saluted as though he had just been promoted to assistant manager. Relieved, I untied my apron and hurried toward the park across the street. And there I saw them, the police walking slowly out of the park, and in their company, on a hastily borrowed leash, was my dog. The officers weren't dragging him, nor were they scolding him. They were walking beside him like he was one of their own. One of them even gave his head a pat when he thought no one was looking. My dog trotted meekly, tail tucked but wagging at the tip, wearing an expression that was both ashamed and grateful, like someone caught stealing cookies but relieved not to be punished too harshly. The policemen kept their faces serious, as though this were an official matter of great importance. But every so often, you could see one of them fighting a smile. And the little crowd that had gathered began to cheer, not for the police, not for me, but for the dog. By the time I reached them, my dog had already become something of a hero. Children clapped, neighbors shook their heads, and even the sternest officer couldn't help scratching him behind the ears. "Yours?" one policeman asked with mock gravity. "Yes," I sighed, trying to stand tall as if I'd been expecting this all along. They nodded, handed me the leash, and with a wink said, "Keep an eye on this one. He's a repeat offender in the making." When I returned to the shop, apron still damp from the dog's shake-off, the woman and her child were waiting at the counter, proud to have kept things in order. She winked at me. All good. No one tried to rob the place, except maybe him. She pointed at my dripping, guilty-looking criminal. From that day on, my dog wasn't just my dog. He was the neighborhood celebrity, the escape artist who befriended penguins, charmed the police, and came home from his arrest to a round of applause. And whenever someone new moved into the block, the aunties would tell them, with a shake of the head and a smile. "That's the dog who was arrested once."